Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Philadelphia, the cradle of liberty. My speech today is going to be about wasted votes. How many people here feel like they've wasted their votes voting Libertarian? Anybody? I'm not hearing anybody. Say hell yeah if you think you wasted your vote voting for Libertarian. Hell no is right. Look, every year, every cycle that we do these things, the Republicans and Democrats, those candidates, they've spent $2.4 billion trying to tell us that their ideas, their failed ideas, are going to be a success somehow if only we vote for them one more time. In 2016, we weren't allowed to vote Libertarian. We were supposed to vote Republican, or we were supposed to vote Democrat, because at that particular time, the election was just too important for us to vote our conscience. That whole thing is absolute nonsense. It's absolute absurdity. Right now, everybody here is here because of one thing. You're looking for a better solution than what the current crop of politicians have been selling us. Our first speaker this evening is a working man. He's an IT consultant, so he owns his own business. This is a guy who has told me once or twice or several times that, you know, if somebody else is going to do this, I have to. I literally have to stand up and make something happen, because if I don't, nothing's going to change. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Matt Baltzar.
So I do need to feel like I need to say I don't own my own business. Thank you, though, Steve. That's great. But I am an IT consultant. So how you doing, everyone? I'm Matt Baltzar. I'm the chair of the Libertarian Party of Philadelphia, and I'm also the candidate for state representative in the 194th District. First of all, thank you. Thank you to each and every one of you for coming out here today. Thank you all for supporting us along this amazing journey. 4 years ago, after standing on the sidelines for years, I finally got involved with the Libertarian Party. Like many other Americans, then and still now, I was frustrated with the slate of candidates being offered by the Republicans and Democrats. Those are our choices? There has to be something better. I'm sure that sounds familiar to everybody here, right? If 2016 taught me nothing else, it finally convinced me of the wisdom of the phrase, all politics is local. I'm here to build a political party that represents the interests of everyday Philadelphians. My goal then, as it is now, is to make sure that anyone in Philly that wants to get involved with the Libertarian Party will not have to look far. Voters are ready for something different. I have been pleasantly surprised with the overwhelmingly positive reception I've had in my district. People generally agree that they want the government off their backs. As Libertarians, we're here to give them a better option than the lesser of two evils that they've been presented with for years. Here in Philadelphia, we basically have single-party rule. The Democrats control almost everything, and the Republicans are content to pick up the scraps. We need a true opposition party in this city, one that offers a real choice, not more of the same. I'm absolutely encouraged by the enthusiasm and dedication of everyone in the Libertarian Party these days, and I am so energized by all of my fellow candidates. People realize that no one can run their life better than they can themselves, especially not the unelected bureaucrats and spineless politicians that currently hold the powers of government. One of my top issues is property tax reform. No one should lose their home because their property taxes were raised. If you've built your life here and you own your home, you should not be paying ever-increasing taxes just to keep it. Another is fair districts. It's absolutely absurd the way our neighborhoods are divided. Why is part of my district in a different county? Enough is enough. Let's put redistricting in the hands of an independent citizens commission. And of course, I wouldn't be a very good Libertarian candidate without this one. Let's end the prohibition of cannabis now. We all know that adults can make their own choices. It's past time that Pennsylvania allowed it. We've heard some pandering in this topic recently, but of course, still no action from Harrisburg. I guess they're too busy trying to keep us libertarians off the ballot. Now, with any luck, more than a few libertarians across the country will win their elections this year. But regardless of our success here in 2020, we're building something bigger. We're all part of a political revolution. Now, thank you all for being part of it. Let's go change the world, and let's start right here.
Thank you, Matt. Our next speaker is running for the position of Attorney General. Oh, come on. Hey, imagine a lawyer who's also a libertarian. Okay? Something good's with this, right? He's a guy who looked at the status quo and said the status quo sucks. You know, how many people here think the status quo sucks? All right. Dan Wasser's been practicing law for 30 years, and he's also a professor of both law and business at a local community college. So it gives me pleasure to introduce Dan Wasser, our next Attorney General.
Thanks, Steve. Hey, everybody, how are you? My name's Dan Wasser, and as Pennsylvania Party's candidate for Attorney General, I'm quite happy to have been so welcomely endorsed by this party of integrity, individual freedom, and principle. In that vein, I speak overwhelmingly in support of Dr. Jo Jorgensen, as well as her running mate, Spike Cohen. Our party is one of pragmatic and practical policies and reflects a platform of personal liberties, which I know Dr. Jorgensen will shortly be speaking more about. Both Jo and Spike exude honor, practicality, and compassion in their direct dealings and relationships with the voters and all they meet. Despite not having big, often questionable sourced budgets from old parties, their enthusiasm and our practical solution approach seems to be resonating among voters like all of you. Problem solving and not big money is what closes this gap amongst voters. Providing practical solutions to government-created problems gives us a leg up over the competition. By identifying with individuals and respect for their liberties, as opposed to simply fostering the goals of special interest, is what distinguishes the Jorgensen-Cohen team as the best choice among voters in 2020. As an individual with former presidential campaign experience, I can overwhelmingly state that the level of honesty, integrity, and principle within our Libertarian Party, and with Jo and Spike in particular, sets a new standard in political discourse to which all people should strive. Largely due to their leadership, people, and not patronage, is their primary concern. For these reasons, they enjoy my personal overwhelming support and endorsement. Voters need to know that these candidates and what they stand for. They need to recognize that the ideals of liberty, equality, and just treatment are still true today as they were when this country was founded right here. Again, I strongly urge the voters to vote for freedom in this country, a freedom which is simply and sadly being encroached upon every day on a daily basis. The only possible choice in this election is to restore liberty with the Jorgensen-Cohen team. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Attorney General. The next person who I'm going to be introducing actually came to Pennsylvania at a point when we weren't sure if we were going to have ballot access here in Pennsylvania. The last 3 weeks of that drive were just unbelievably difficult, and so many people came out to help us gather signatures, and it was really awesome. Joe Jorgensen showed up in Pennsylvania. Spike Cohen showed up in Pennsylvania, and both of them helped us gather signatures. Both of them were there in Harrisburg at final turn-in. And at that particular point, I'm going to say one thing, and one thing for sure. Joe, you are a member of the Libertarian Party of Pennsylvania. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me introduce Joe Jorgensen.
Thank you. I'll give you the official reading. Thank you so much today. It's been a liberty-filled day today. I'm here in front of Independence Hall, which is amazing. It's amazing it hasn't been torn down or nothing happened. You would think somebody along the way would say danger. And I also got to see the Statue of Liberty today, which was exciting, and really exciting for me since 3 of my grandparents are immigrants. And it was one of my grandparents, my grandmother, that gave me the love I have for our country. She's the one who instilled in me American values. She told me how in the old country, it didn't matter how much you worked, and you could take a second or third job, and it didn't matter because the government took the extra away so everybody would have the same. And by the way, talking to her, it sounds like she might have been from the Soviet Union or an Eastern Bloc country. Actually, she was from Denmark. And unfortunately, we're getting more and more like Denmark every day. And as you know, I've been crisscrossing the country. Some of you may have seen the bus we're doing that in. And everywhere I go, I hear people say how the old system just isn't working. And rather than wasting another decade trying to see if politicians figure it out, I'm here to tell you that you know best what's best for you. And that's why I'm asking for your vote for President of the United States. As president, I will get government out of the way so my grandmother's vision of the American dream can be a reality for us all. Our current government is too big, too bossy, too nosy, too intrusive. And besides that, what gives them the right? We need to put decision-making power back into your hands because you can spend your money better than any special interest, lobbyist, or bureaucrat in Washington can. Now, the federal government thinks they're helping the prison system, but in the end, basically they're budgeting $80 billion a year to keep people away from their loved ones, mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters, put into the court system because we've had mandatory minimums and discretion taken out of the judges. We cannot claim to be the land of the free when we lead the world in incarcerations. We have 5% of the world's population, but house 20% of its prisoners. And one of the biggest factors that led to a quadrupling of our prison population since just 1980 is the racist and destructive war on drugs. All we have to do is take a step back to the Prohibition era to see the parallels. Despite realizing how poorly alcohol prohibition went, we have replaced it with a carbon copy. Drug kingpins have replaced mob bosses, and drug dens have replaced speakeasies. When was the last time you heard of a liquor store owner going up and down the halls of a high school trying to push gin on high school students? Or when's the last time you heard of a vodka addict breaking into houses in order to support a vodka habit? And when was the last time you heard of two liquor store owners having a shootout to see who gets the best corner? What we have now is not a drug problem. What we have is a prohibition problem. There should be no law to prevent you from owning an object, whether it's a gun to protect yourself or drugs for whatever reason you wish. If there is no victim, there is no crime. As your president, I will federally decriminalize all drugs and encourage states to treat drug use as a health issue, not a criminal issue. We should allow the medical community to deal with substance abuse in a way that salvages lives, instead of throwing them away. Accordingly, I will pardon anyone at the federal level of any victimless crime. These are just a few steps toward ending the over-incarceration of people of color and letting consensual adults become safer and adult activities become safer and destigmatized. In addition to the overcrowding of our federal prisons, the war on drugs has negatively affected our communities and the interactions that many people have with police. The drug war has single-handedly created gangs that police themselves, often through violence. Consequently, the federal government has created a police state with the Drug Enforcement Administration and Department of Homeland Security. They have repeatedly raided medical marijuana clinics where medical marijuana is completely legal. And, by the way, they take $50 billion of our tax dollars every year. And unfortunately, long gone is the local police officer who walks the beat and knows everyone by name. We see the cop cars with protect and serve and community. And these are all such nice words, and they used to mean something until the federal government got involved. And instead of protecting and serving, the federal government has brought in nameless, faceless SWAT teams that make our Americans feel like enemy combatants in their own neighborhoods. As your president, I will federally defund involvement in policing, including the DEA and DHS. That means ending the supplying of surplus military equipment like tanks and tear gas to over 8,000 federal, state, and local police forces. I will end no-knock raids, which too often end up killing innocent bystanders like Breonna Taylor. And, as Libertarian Congressman Justin Amash has brought up, when police do misbehave, it is nearly impossible to take legal action because of an arcane doctrine known as qualified immunity, which states that victims can only successfully sue an officer when a clear rights violation has already been established in a prior case. When I am your president, I will end qualified immunity so that police are held to the same standard as everyone else. And while millions of Americans have suffered from our government's war on drugs, every American has been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic in some way. Now, South Korea confirmed its first coronavirus within a day of our first case and quickly jumped ahead in testing containing the spread. As infections in U.S. skyrocketed, South Korea nearly eradicated COVID-19, and they did so without any lockdowns. A testing initiative by Bill Gates was the first to roll out tests in the U.S. that could be done outside of a U.S. hospital. Of course, over the course of 10 weeks, they had processed 20,000 tests. But on May 12th, the FDA stopped them from further testing and said they needed, quote unquote, further assessment. This is just one example of how the FDA has worsened the COVID-19 crisis and made it extremely difficult for anyone to get tested. Currently, only those companies with enough money and resources are able to even get approval process, and once they do, they weaponize their patents to hold a monopoly. It costs about $1 billion to bring a drug to market, and thanks to the federal government, the FDA, it's about a 10-year process. Meanwhile, it's the patients who suffer, who are desperately waiting for a drug that could possibly save their lives. New medicines and procedures should get to patients as quickly and safely as possible. When I am your president, I will get rid of the efficacy requirement of the FDA, if not the FDA entirely. And the FDA isn't the only issue with the American healthcare system. Let's be honest, it's not working for anyone. And my heart goes out to the millions of Americans who've been left behind, those American families who have been bankrupted. For decades, the politicians in Washington, D.C. have blamed the free market healthcare system, saying instead we need a single-payer system. Well, I've got news for them. We haven't had a free market healthcare system in nearly a century. And the alternative to our current big government failure isn't an even bigger government failure. When I hear politicians say we need Medicare for all, what I hear them say is we need VA hospital for all. And this top-down monopoly isn't acceptable for anyone, especially those who were willing to risk their lives for our country. We cannot wait for government bureaucrats to decide who lives and who dies. We must put control back into the hands of the patients. As I see it, the biggest problem we have with our healthcare system is that our insurance isn't really insurance at all. In any other industry, insurance only pays for unexpected costs, and that way they can keep costs relatively low. In our broken down healthcare system, it pays for everything. Now think about how that would work in the other parts of your lives. Imagine car insurance. What if it paid for gas, oil, and car washes? First of all, you would have absolutely no reason to shop around for the lowest gasoline price. In fact, you might even go to the best gas station, the nice gas station, because they offer you a free coffee while you wait. I mean, what do you care? You take out your little $5 copay and you're on your way. They could increase prices without you even knowing, and of course there would be no competition there, because they would simply pass along the prices to the insurance companies. And then what would the car insurance companies do? They'd simply raise your premiums the next year. And then it would just spiral out of control like it has in the healthcare industry. Now, we've heard some people say that insurance companies are what's helping to hold the cost down. But the dirty little secret is the only way they increase their profits is to hand out more claims than they did the prior year so they can raise their premiums. In fact, now let me mention, of course, they have to deny some claims, but they have to accept or approve more of them just to increase their profits. And this is exactly what's happening in our healthcare system. We have no reason to shop around for the best healthcare prices, and therefore healthcare providers don't have any reason to compete, and the cost gets passed along. Insurance companies can charge higher prices without any accountability, and we're the ones left footing the bill. Now, two good examples of how a free market could work would be Singapore and the state of Indiana. In Singapore, they use insurance only for catastrophic care, as insurance is meant to be. Their costs per person are about a third of what ours are. And by the way, their doctor visits are only about $10. That's less than our copay here. The state of Indiana put in a system pretty similar to that, and it was voluntary. The first year, only a handful of people enrolled, but when everybody saw how great the system was, by the second year, 75% of their employees had gotten into the system. The use of generic drugs went from 10% to 90%. By the way, it shouldn't surprise anybody that only 10% were generic in the beginning, because again, you never spend other people's money as well as you spend your own. They were happy, though, to buy generic drugs in this program because they got to keep the savings. And that's the way it should work. Whether you buy groceries or a new car or a new computer, if you get a cheaper price, you get to keep the savings. The VA healthcare system should be converted to a system like Indiana, where we put the dollars into the pockets of the veterans and let them decide how and where and when to use them. Now, the government letdown of our soldiers doesn't begin with healthcare. In fact, it starts from the day they enlist. There are people overseas who weren't even born when the supposed war on terror began. The United States spends more on its military than the next 7 countries combined. And we're in 160 different countries around the world. And what do we have to show for it? In the last 20 years alone, 500,000 people in Pakistan, Iraq, and Afghanistan have died, including 250,000 civilians. So these are parents, siblings, and children who will never return home. In every election, politicians promise more peace, but they only deliver more war. If I'm elected president, my first official act will be to bring the troops home. I want to turn America into one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. Our military must be trained to defend our shores, but we have to stop meddling around the world and make peace with our world neighbors. Now, the military budget is far from the only example of how the government has misdirected the economy. The IRS taxes Americans at every turn, and the tax system is so complicated that only those who can afford personal accountants and tax lawyers can even navigate the code. And that same IRS that taxes us to death probes into every personal financial detail of our lives, deciding how much we should spend. Meanwhile, the federal government accumulates more debt. Now, half the people in Washington say we need to increase military spending, and the other half say we need to increase domestic spending. So what's their bipartisan compromise? They simply increase both. As your president, my veto pen is going to need a lot of extra ink. Runaway spending is also made possible by the Federal Reserve. When the federal government isn't able to raise taxes, it simply prints more money without any backing. Since the Fed was created over a century ago, the American dollar has lost 96% of its value. We should reduce and get rid of regulations to allow cryptocurrency and any other form of currency to enter the market. As your president, I will first audit and then end the Federal Reserve. I will eliminate the IRS and work with Congress towards eliminating the federal income tax altogether. It's time to move money out of the government sector and back to the people who earned it. Politicians and bureaucrats don't know what you need. You do. Now, when it comes to spending, we cannot take any solution off the table. I would encourage baseline budgeting, which instead of simply assuming an increase, as they do now, you start at 0 every year and then decide what's vital from there. It's time for the government to balance its checkbook in the same way American families do. Given the challenges we face as a country, it's easy to feel like the change I'm talking about just can't happen. But I believe it can because I believe in you. I believe in the individuals who make up our great country. I see America through my grandmother's eyes, a place where the rights of the individual are greater than the power of government, a place where liberty means minimum government and maximum freedom, a place where the American dream isn't a dream at all. It's real and it's right there in front of you because you made it happen. As I ask for your vote this November, it's not because I'm asking you to cast a vote for me. Instead, I think you should vote for you. You know best how your money should be spent. You know best what your family priorities are. You know best what's best for you. Thank you very much. And I would love to answer questions. We've got Katie here in her lovely skirt.
So tonight, I am going to be that libertarian that tells you what to do. So if you would like to ask Mama Joe a question, I'm going to ask you to come over here, single file line. We're going to take one question per person, and we are going to be limited on how many questions we can take tonight. So if you'll go ahead and come over here and line up single file line, we'll get started.
Hi, how you doing?
We're going to go right here.
Hi. I am a teacher, so I was just
Me too.
curious. My cousin actually had you as a professor.
Oh, uh-oh, what did you hear?
All good things, all good
I
things.
hope I didn't. I actually kicked students out for using cell phones, so I hope I didn't kick your cousin out.
Me too. But I was just curious on what are your stance on education and public schools and that type of stuff.
And what was the last one?
Just like the
Yeah.
budget and education.
Yeah. So education is a local issue. It should be decided among parents, teachers, and students. And there's no reason whatsoever to have the federal government involved for any of that. Now, unlike bringing the troops home the first day, I can't get rid of the Department of Education. The president doesn't have that power. But what I will do is instruct Congress to pretty much get rid of the budget for it, and we can work towards eliminating it. You know, the needs of students in rural Appalachia, different than the needs in New York City, different than Philadelphia. And right now, at least $500, but maybe up to $1,500, you know, depending on the math, per student goes to the federal government. Think about if the localities got to keep that money. We wouldn't have teachers having to buy boxes of Kleenex and crayons. So thank you for that.
Hey, good evening, JoJo. Thank
Hey.
you for speaking in front of the birthplace of America, Philadelphia. My name is Tim Daly. I am a combat Navy veteran. And for 17 years,
Thank
I've
you.
been fighting to get benefits that I'm entitled to. And to this day, I'm still not collecting my full benefits. Also, my fellow veterans are dying every 22 seconds from suicide. As less than 1% of the American population, we have more homelessness in our veteran population than any other population in the history of the human race.
Yep.
I would like to know what you, as my president, who I'm going to vote for on November 3rd,
Thank you.
is going to do to bring our boys home and take care of them, as this country always should have been doing. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, as I said, I will bring the troops home starting on the first day. Now, a lot of people say, well, that's what Trump said. And by the way, I really think he might have been sincere. I really think he thought he could do it. But he didn't realize the force of the military-industrial complex. And, you know, when you talk about the swamp and stuff, you think of it in theoretical terms, but then he gets there and he sees that all these people making all this money are his buddies, you know, fellow classmates from college and so forth. So even though he came in as an outsider, as not a politician, he still had connections. And I think that's what's making it hard for him because, you know, we've got all these people at the Pentagon who, first of all, they make big salaries on their own. And then on top of that, if they, when they retire, then they can do consulting and they can make more in a month than most people make in a year. And that's got to stop. So I will have absolutely no problem bringing the troops home and getting rid of the military-industrial complex. I'm not well connected. I don't have friends, so that's not a problem. And also, I would, and by the way, for those of you who don't know, there were more donations sent to Ron Paul than all the other candidates combined in the 2012 election from people overseas. And people like, but wait a minute, the military, you would think that they would want, you know, more spending, but they're the ones over there seeing that it's just not working. And, you know, if they're not over there, then we don't get the PTSD, the suicides, because they're home being productive here. And by the way, legalizing marijuana will help too with that. Thank you. Thanks.
Hi, Joe.
Hey.
My name's Christine. When I am campaigning for you, a lot of the reaction I get is, how can she work across the lines?
Yep.
And I was curious if I saw your Supreme Court nominees, and I was wondering if you were planning for your cabinet to reach across the lines and utilize maybe Tulsi Gabbard or someone from from either
Okay.
side as your cabinet.
Yeah, so my short answer to working with Congress is I'm a teacher and I know how to handle problem students. That's my answer for the debates and everything else. Yeah, what I would do, first of all, Ronald Reagan, despite the myth that he made government smaller, he made government bigger every year, year after year after year, increased spending. And people say, well, but what do you expect? Congress didn't give him a balanced budget or a smaller budget. But the problem is he just happily signed it instead of saying, no, send it, take it back. I will send the budget back 20 times if I have to get one that I would sign. Now, they could they could overrule me, of course, but I would remind them that if they want their nice, cushy jobs, I was the one voted president by their constituents, and maybe they should do what their constituents want so they get voted again. So thanks for that.
Hi, Dr. Jorgensen.
Hey.
It's an honor. So you said you wanted to get rid of the Federal Reserve, which you definitely should do. Is it your plan to return to the gold standard, or do you want to go to a different standard for our currency?
I want a free market standard. The gold standard doesn't go far enough. Back in the early days, people used to talk about how if they couldn't pay the doctor in their little hometown, they would bring chickens to pay for their doctor bill. If you're a business and you want to accept chickens as currency and your customers want to pay you in chickens, that should be your prerogative. So I want free market and money like everything else. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Kirk. I'm actually voting Libertarian continuing since 1984 with Dr. Ron.
Thank you.
Still haven't joined the party. I'm thinking about it. But question I have for you. You mentioned about hurting Congress as a teacher.
Yeah.
But how are you going to make them actually read the Constitution and understand what it really means? They're the ones that are supposed to be making the laws, and they pass off that. All those things need to be vetoed and make them forced to do their job.
Yeah, so they don't really have to understand the Constitution to understand, I just gave you your bill back, your budget, it's not working, do it again. I'm not going to sign it. And also, I was going to make another comment on that, but term limits, because some people bring up term limits. Congress is a problem. Now, before you get too excited, I do come down on the side of term limits, but I'm not campaigning on it because I think that's just treating the symptom. As long as there's power and money to be had, there are people who are going to go after it, and that might just put more power into the parties. So we need to fix the core problem, which is to get the money and power out of Washington. But yeah, I would just keep sending it back and setting them straight. Thanks.
So I know you want to end drug prohibition.
Yes.
How would you handle the prescription medication system, which regulates the usage of drugs that aren't necessarily used recreationally and may not harm an individual, but things like antibiotics that don't harm the person using them inappropriately, but they can harm society when they're used too much, when they're not necessary.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, I get the whole superbug thing. And that's very worrisome. I would leave it to the companies that produce it and the doctors and people who prescribe it, because if anytime you get federal government involved, things just get worse. In fact, my running mate Harry Brown in '96 used to say, if you got government involved in abortion, pretty soon men would be having them. So if we start with restrictions there, well then that will, cascade down to 16 other problems. And that's why I say when people ask me why I'm running for president, it's because government is too big, too bossy, too nosy, as I mentioned. But the worst part is they usually end up hurting the very people they try to help, like the FDA. the FDA is there to make us safer, and yet it prevented dozens of testing kits from getting to America, because of the obstacles. And it is preventing drugs from getting to people, and people are having their choices taken away. So just because the federal government doesn't regulate it doesn't mean that people among themselves won't regulate it. For instance, like automobiles and if you go test drive a car or whatever, I mean, just because the federal government doesn't put a rule there doesn't mean that other people aren't going to put a rule there. And by the way, I wouldn't stop the states from doing things. I would hope that a libertarian would be in the state and help at that level. So thanks. But antibiotics, I realize that's a problem.
Hi, good evening. My name is Justin. This will be my first election voting. So I just want to
Welcome.
Thank you. If you do condemn violence towards the community and law enforcement, how do you expect law enforcement to de-escalate situations of inevitable riots?
Well, here's the problem, though. How did we get there to begin with? And I would suggest, especially as somebody who studies psychology, that it was turning the police officers into soldiers, and instead of having a protect and serve mentality, they have an us versus them soldier mentality, that it escalated more quickly than it should have. And this is what's really frustrating, is that if you ask, like if you were to put a referendum on the ballot in pretty much any city in this country, and you ask the taxpayers, would you like an increase in your taxes so that our police department can buy a tank? I think most people would say, no, don't raise my taxes for that. I'd rather spend that money on going out to dinner, a nice restaurant or a nicer vacation or whatever. But instead, the federal government takes our tax money, then dangles the tanks and stuff in front of the police departments. And of course the police department, since when do you turn down free stuff, right? And, here, if a tank is offered, they're going to say, well, geez, we don't want the people in Alabama to get it. It's our taxpayer dollars. Sure, we'll take the free tank. So I would try to get as many of those tanks back as possible. Now, do you need to have something like that for backup? Sure, but not as a first defense. And the president should come in when asked by the governor if there is a real situation. So I'm not suggesting that we just let rioting run rampant. What I'm saying is I think it escalated faster, and that we need to have that as an ending point, not a starting point, because maybe if we didn't act in such a combative manner, thanks to the federal government, because, the police, they didn't sign up to go to the army, they signed up to be policemen. So I think we just let police act like police and things would get better. Thanks.
Hi, Joe. My name's Nick Shankin, and I heard you mention a couple things. You mentioned cryptocurrency, and you also mentioned pardoning nonviolent offenders.
Right.
I would like to ask you specifically about Ross Ulbricht.
Yes.
And if he's someone that you would pardon if you were elected.
On the first day, I have Ross Ulbricht, Julian Assange, Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning. Now, I'm not sure if I would pardon them on the way to the Pentagon to bring the troops home or on the way back in the hallway from, but that will be on the first day. One more day is too much. Thanks.
Hi, Dr. Joe. How's it going?
Hey,
my name is Ben Heckman, and I am actually a state chair for Young Americans for Liberty in Pennsylvania.
Oh, thank you.
So I actually have a simple question. What would you do about the CIA?
They're irredeemable. I'd get rid of them. Now, some libertarians think that this goes too far. I do think we need some type of military intelligence. If China finds out where our submarines are, I think it's good for us to know. But the CIA, but the CIA is just, it's too far gone. So I would put those things within like military intelligence and not have a separate society. And Department of Homeland Security. Basically, we need to go to our first 4 or 5, Department of Treasury, Department of Defense, and so on, and get rid of the alphabet soup after that. Thanks. And the ATF.
Hi, Joe.
Hey.
Thanks for coming to Philly.
Thanks for the warm welcome.
Yeah. My name's Andrew. Honestly, I'm a bit of a single-issue voter this election.
Okay.
I'm wondering what your approach is to the rise of identitarianism on the left and right in our country, and what your solution is to that.
So I've never heard it phrased that way. In like 2 sentences or less, can you tell me what that is?
Just in terms of people, it's identity politics, people grouping themselves together by race, sexual preference. Gender,
yes. Yes, okay, I've heard of identity politics. I never heard of it as identity. Well, you can go over all of my debates pre-nomination when we were debating, and pretty much every speech since then. Not once have I said, hey, I'm a woman, therefore vote for me. And in fact, I maybe we should tell the guy, please don't put this in the documentary, but some guy was following us on the bus, and he asked me, what are the obstacles you face as a woman? And I said, I haven't faced any yet, but I wouldn't tell you about them anyway because I don't want to sound like a whiny Democrat. So every American has the same rights. We need to move to that. End of story. Thanks.
Hi, Dr. Jorgensen.
Hey.
My name's Nick. 107 years ago, the 16th and 17th Amendments were passed, and I think those laid the groundwork for the sucking of money and power into Washington, D.C. How do you feel about an Article 5 Convention of States to truly take the power out of the Beltway and bring it to the states?
Yeah, I do believe that that states need to have the power that they rightfully have. In fact, one of the examples I've given, sometimes at rallies, people will say, well, what are you going to do about infrastructure? You know, what are you going to do about roads? You know, our roads are terrible. And I say, here's the problem when you involve the federal government, is there's always a price. And I point out how Elizabeth Dole in the 90s, and by the way, some of you young people, you may not know this, and here's reason enough to vote Libertarian. Before Elizabeth Dole, we had different drinking ages in different states. In fact, the drinking age was 18 in the state that I went to school, and I was actually a bartender my last year. So, but what happened was people paid all their highway funds, and then Elizabeth Dole basically held those dollars hostage and told every state, if you want your highway dollars back, which by the way are your dollars, you gave them to us, you're going to have to raise your drinking age to 21. And that's why we have an age of 21 across the country. Now, let me quickly add, 21 might be a better age, and we can debate that, but it shouldn't be the federal government deciding that. So whether it's roads, whether it's education, whether it's crime, again, crime is a local issue. Police assault robbery should be decided by police, mayor, city council. Let them do that. Federal government just, the job of the president needs to be a lot easier, like just kind of sit around all day. So thanks.
Hi, Dr. Joe. My name is JP, and I was just wondering if there was only one thing you could do in your presidency, what it would be, and then who your favorite founding father was.
Well, it'd have to be Thomas Jefferson. That's the easy one. And by the way, it's really a shame how what's happening to our history, and people are dismissing all the founding fathers for not outlawing slavery. But I've been told by history buffs that Thomas Jefferson actually went before the Virginia legislature to try to free his slaves. And after watching Outlander, now I kind of understand how if you have slaves, even if you try to get rid of them, you pretty much get hanged by the town people, and it kind of makes it more real. But what was what I would do? I mean, I would have to think about this. It would be a toss-up between getting rid of it might be getting rid of the federal income tax, because maybe then they wouldn't have enough money to start a single-payer system. The thing is I think that healthcare is so important that we got to do anything we can to keep from becoming a VA hospital for all. So if it looked like ending the income tax would do that, then that would be my crowning achievement, or entering a real free market. That'd be a close runner-up. Thanks. and bringing the troops home. It's hard, so much to do all at once.
Good evening, Dr. Jorgensen.
Hey.
My name is Will. I'm a Marine veteran. Any Marines
Thank
out there?
Thank you. My best friend in high school went on to become a Marine.
Outstanding. My question is that after being in the Marine Corps for so long, not so long, I was in enlistment. I've seen a lot of individuals that have fallen victim to an allure of power and become corrupt leaders by being there. I'm sure there's
Right.
too many veterans out here that have seen things happen that, yourself being human, I'm wondering if you have thought the potential of the allure of power or money. Is there anything in place that you would do to prevent that from being something that happens to yourself?
Well, that's why we got to get money out of the system. Well, let me tell you, I've been asked by a few interviewers, newspaper, radio. So when did you first become interested in politics? And my answer is, I'm still not interested in politics. And I've had other interviewers ask me, so I guess you were what, student body president? You ran for student council? And my answer is no. I read Animal Farm in grade school, and then when I got to high school and I saw that we had a student council, I was just kind of repulsed, like, that's not fair. Why do the elite few get to make rules for the rest of us? So I've never liked any kind of government. So I never in a million years, I've never taken a political science class. I mean, I'm not interested in politics. But I heard a libertarian on the radio when I lived in Dallas, which, by the way, if you don't know yet, that's where my election party is going to be. Come on down. And since that's where I first heard of libertarianism, and my communist state won't let me have one in my hometown of near Chicago. So I guess the answer would be to do it very quickly. But if it helps you to know, I actually teach about power in my social psychology class. So yeah, I understand that's one of the things that once you get more, or once you get it, you want more of it. Like you never get satiated. So you're absolutely right. I would just be too embarrassed to not say what I was going to do. I don't know how Trump can live with himself after not bringing the troops home. So yeah. Thank you. Hey.
Good evening, Dr. Jorgensen. My name's Kyle Rickert. I work in healthcare. I'm in nursing school right now.
Okay.
So naturally, healthcare is one of my priorities.
Yes.
You kind of already touched on it a little bit earlier, but one of the things that's always weighed on my mind is health insurance. So I understand.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I understand the idea that the free market and upfront pricing in healthcare will help reduce costs long term. But as somebody who actually has family that rely on the Affordable Care Act, what would you say to those kinds of people that rely on that, and where do you stand on it?
Yeah, so first of all, the way Singapore works, and it's not a completely free market system, and by the way, since you're in the healthcare field, I guess you've seen how prices in LASIK surgery have gone down dramatically, and yet the quality has gone up, and they can do such amazing things, and you don't see the price go down in much of the other fields. In Singapore, the people, well, let me go to the state of Indiana. The state of Indiana, the government actually puts dollars into their hands so they can go around, go to the doctor, go to the checkup, go for, sinus infection, whatever. And then they only use the catastrophic care for unexpected costs. So what I would do to get the ball rolling, because the thing is, if we yank the rug out from under us all right now, we couldn't have a free market because the government has bloated the prices so much. So what I would do is I would literally put dollars into the hands of not only veterans, but people on Medicare and Medicaid to get people shopping, to start bringing the price down for everybody else, to get the price down to where it would be no problem. Now, in the meantime, if they couldn't afford, and again, if they're on Medicare or Medicaid, they still get help. They just get it to where, they're looking out for price. But let me just mention real quick about charity, because we've kind of, I'm kind of surprised, to be honest, that Americans are as charitable as they are, since it's so easy to say I gave at the office, because we are forced to give at the office. And, but anything done through the private charity, whether it's to help pay for medical expenses, like you got St. Jude or Ronald McDonald House, where you don't pay for a penny if you stay there. Charities do a much better job, and we saw in the early 90s The United Way CEO bought something like $400,000 worth of artwork, which, by the way, would cost about $1 million now. And donations dried up. People said, we didn't give you that money for fancy artwork. We gave you that money to help, unwed mothers or addicts or, people with a health crisis. And so the United Way had to work to get that money back, so they had to show that they could use the dollars responsibly. Now you look at Obamacare. They've got high overhead. We've all heard of the $600 hammers, in the Defense Department. So what happens when they spend too much? Or, like the $50,000 drapes that we heard about the UN ambassador, which, yes, I realize they were ordered ahead of time. The government does stupid stuff like that too, but there's no accountability. So by turning that over, if people aren't paying their dollars to the federal government to be wasted on like $50,000 curtains and so forth, if they can hold the people they give the money to accountable, or hold them accountable, then they will do a much better job than the government. And last, let me mention, this drives me nuts when people like Bill Gates or Oprah Winfrey, they say, oh, I need to pay more in taxes. I don't pay enough. And yet they have their own private charities. And with Bill Gates, they've got the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And my question is, well, Bill, if you think the government does such a great job, why don't you simply turn all your money over to a federal government program and let them hand out the money? He's got to think that he does a better job, or he would do that. Oh, and by the way, if you think government is so efficient, why don't you just turn Microsoft over too? Let them run it. I mean, obviously the private sector can do anything better than the government. So thanks for that.
We have time for one more quick question.
Quick? Okay, I'll try. See, I give these long answers so you know I really am a college lecturer.
Hello, Dr.
Hey.
Jorgensen. Welcome to Philadelphia. I'm honored.
Thank you.
My question is on immigration.
Uh-huh.
As an immigrant myself, I'm wondering what are your, what are the 3 major things you would like to see change?
Yeah, I can answer this fairly quickly. I won't give my longer answer, but I can make it quick. And keep in mind, 3 of my grandparents are immigrants. This country basically had open borders until the 1920s, and things were fine. It's immigrants who make this country great. And, we're a country of immigrants. So I would turn it back to what it was like before the 1920s, when we basically had open borders, and 2 myths. The myth that people come over here to live off the system. First of all, most welfare programs have something like a 5-year waiting list. And by the way, GDP-wise, immigrants increase the GDP. And as far as crime goes, foreign-born Americans commit fewer crimes than Americans who are born on American soil. So I say let them in and let's make this country great. So thank you so much. Oh, I used Donald Trump's line. Sorry. But no, but that's because I always put how great America has become because of immigrants. So I slid into his line. So let's make America, I don't know, free again. Free again. Thank you. Let's make America free again. Thank you.
Keep it going for Mama Jo. She's incredible.
can
That's what you're here
barely
for,
walk.
right? Our own Lady Liberty.
Thanks.
Keep it going for your speakers and keep it going for yourselves, because you guys are out here. And when it's this campaign, people have changed, and real people for real change. Thank you. They were directing me. They're not libertarians, so they can tell me what to do. All right, so as you guys know, we are traveling this country, and we are trying to get Mama Jo's message out there, our message of integrity and freedom. And it takes money, because we have that big, beautiful bus back there, and as we know, it makes money that makes the wheels go round. So I'm here to ask you, can I have some gas money? I really need it. We want to get her in front of as many people as we possibly can. And right now, I've got my big, beautiful Joe bucket that's carried by Steve over here. And if you've got a cash donation of $50 or less, you can just drop it in there and go on your merry little way. If you'd like to stay socially distant and safe, you can go onto your smartphone and go to joe20.com/give. That's JO20.com/give. And you can make a single contribution. I guess at this point, it's a single contribution. And we would greatly appreciate it. If you would like to contribute through check or of a denomination of more than $50, then I've got a little piece of paper that I would like, or I'm going to ask that you to sign, because FEC, right? Boo. Yeah, thank you. And so that's what we've got for you tonight. I really want to see more people in front of Mama Jo where she listens to that message and she changes hearts, she changes minds, and she gains votes, and we increase and go back to liberty. Because this is the birthplace of our liberty. And this is where I'm going to call on you guys to fill that bucket, fill the gas tank. You guys showed up tonight. Now I'm going to ask you to put out. All right, now I've got Ken. Ken, can I have you real quick? All right. Ken's got a little announcement for you, so stick around. And then I also need Derek. Derek, you know who you are. I need you over here. Jess needs you over here. Thank you.
There we go. Hey, Philadelphia! The fun is not over yet. My name is Ken Krawchuk. I was our candidate for governor of Pennsylvania on the Libertarian ticket in 2018. I'm also the host of the Pennsylvania Project talk radio show here in Philadelphia, the largest media market in the state. If you remember Irv Homer on WW.